Stories and Documentary Network.
Beneath the dense emerald canopy of Mexico's tropical lowlands, where the cries of howler monkeys echo through mist-shrouded forests, a colossal stone face stares silently across the centuries. Its expression is both regal and mysterious, part man, part god, entirely alien to the modern world. These monumental heads, each carved from volcanic basalt and weighing many tons, are the first whispers of a long-forgotten kingdom, the Olmec. Long before the rise of the Maya or the might of the Aztec Empire, the Olmec laid the foundations of Mesoamerican civilization. Their cities thrived in what is now the Gulf Coast region of Mexico, between the swamps of Tabasco and the hills of Veracruz. Yet, unlike their more well-documented successors, the Olmec left no written histories, only enigmatic ruins, cryptic art, and a legacy embedded in the cultures that followed. Who were these people? How did they come to shape a world that barely remembers their name? In the 19th century, when farmers first uncovered these immense heads buried in the jungle soil, few could comprehend their significance. Were they relics of a forgotten African kingdom? Evidence of alien contact? Or the handiwork of one of humanity's earliest civilizations in the New World? As archaeologists brushed away the layers of earth and time, a deeper, richer story began to emerge. This was no primitive tribe, but a sophisticated society with complex religion, political structure, monumental architecture, and far-reaching trade. The Olmec were more than just artisans or stone carvers. They were astronomers who aligned cities to the stars, engineers who altered landscapes to suit their needs, and visionaries who crafted the earliest known symbols of Mesoamerican spirituality. From the iconic jaguar gods to their mysterious ballgames and ceremonial centers, the Olmec worldview shaped generations to come. Yet just as suddenly as they rose, the Olmec seemed to disappear. Their great cities, San Lorenzo, Venta, Tres Zapotes, were abandoned. Their gods were adopted but renamed. Their script was forgotten. What caused the fall of this kingdom? Was it environmental collapse, internal upheaval, or outside invasion? Or did their culture simply transform and migrate into others? Long before the great stone heads were carved, before rituals echoed in ceremonial plazas, and gods were born from myth, a people emerged in the lush and mysterious lowlands of what is now southern Mexico. Between the humid jungles and the meandering waterways of the Gulf Coast, a civilization began to take root, one that would leave behind no written history, but an enduring imprint on an entire continent. This was the dawn of the Olmec. Their homeland stretched across the modern Mexican states of Veracruz and Tabasco, a land where nature was both ally and adversary. It was a world defined by water, rivers that twisted like serpents through forests, swamps that breathed steam, and skies that poured with rain. The Coatzacoalcos and Tonalá rivers became lifelines, nourishing the land, feeding the people, and connecting one village to another. The region's heavy rainfall and fertile soil created an agricultural haven, despite the constant risk of flooding, disease, and natural disaster. From this seemingly inhospitable landscape rose the earliest known cities of Mesoamerica. Around 1500 BCE, the first major Olmec settlement began to flourish, San Lorenzo. Set atop an artificially leveled plateau, this city was no accidental cluster of homes. It was planned, sculpted, and engineered. Massive earthen mounds rose above the floodplain, stone drains carried water with precision, and colossal heads stood as silent sentinels over plazas and sacred spaces. The scale of construction suggests a complex society with organized labor, centralized leadership, and a clear vision. Further east, Venta would rise as the next great center of Olmec life. By around 900 BCE, as San Lorenzo declined, Venta became the spiritual and political heart of the civilization. Located on an island in a swampy area near the Gulf, Venta featured pyramidal mounds, ceremonial platforms, and a layout aligned with celestial events. A sign that the Olmec already possessed astronomical knowledge and religious symbolism deeply tied to nature and the cosmos. Later, around 40 BCE, Tres Zapotes would emerge, continuing the Olmec tradition even as their cultural dominance began to wane. The people who built these cities were known to later civilizations as the Olmec, a term derived from the Nahuatl word Olmecatl, meaning rubber people. This name likely refers to their association with the region's natural rubber trees, whose latex was harvested and used to make balls for sacred games, rituals of life, death, and cosmic balance. But to themselves, these early people may have had other names, long lost to time. What remains is their culture, etched into stone and soil. The Olmec were not only builders, they were farmers, innovators, and pioneers of subsistence. They cultivated a triad of staple crops that would sustain Mesoamerica for millennia: maize, beans, and squash. These were not merely food items. They were spiritual offerings, divine gifts, and symbols of life itself. Alongside these, they grew manioc, chili peppers, and cacao, the latter a luxury good that would later become the basis of currency and ritual in Maya and Aztec culture. Their mastery of agriculture allowed them to settle permanently, support large populations, and free some individuals to specialize in arts, crafts, politics, and priesthood. Surplus crops enabled the rise of elites, who in turn directed labor toward monumental construction and long-distance trade. From the highlands came obsidian, from distant mountains, jade, a material the Olmec revered and carved into masks, blades, and amulets. Parrots, jaguar pelts, and exotic feathers suggest trading routes that stretched far beyond the Gulf Coast. But the land also tested them. Tropical storms lashed their cities. Riverbanks eroded. Disease stalked the wetlands. To survive, the Olmec learned to adapt, digging canals, raising platforms, and understanding the rhythms of the land. They didn't conquer nature. They listened to it, aligned their lives with its cycles, and saw in it the presence of gods and spirits. The jaguar stalking the forest floor, the crocodile sliding through marshes, the thunder in the sky, all were sacred beings, part of a world alive with supernatural force. As the morning mist lifts over the jungles of Veracruz, shadows of the past begin to take form. Monumental altars, figurines of beings half human, half animal, and ceremonial platforms aligned to the stars. For the Olmec, daily life was never separate from the divine. Every river, mountain, and storm was alive, inhabited by spirits and deities whose will shaped the world. Religion wasn't confined to temples. It flowed through every facet of their civilization. It gave meaning to their art, dictated their politics, and justified the building of their great cities. To understand the Olmec, one must step into their sacred world, a world where gods walked among men, and men became gods. The Olmec worldview was rooted in shamanism and animism, beliefs shared by many early civilizations. They saw the universe as a layered realm, divided between the sky, the earth, and the underworld. Intermediaries, shamans, played a critical role in maintaining balance between these worlds. Through trance, dance, and ritual sacrifice, these spiritual leaders could communicate with supernatural forces, embody animal spirits, and channel divine energy. Transformation was not metaphor, it was sacred reality. At the center of Olmec cosmology stood a pantheon of powerful and enigmatic gods, each representing vital forces of nature and cosmic order. Chief among them was the jaguar god, a ferocious deity tied to rain, fertility, and the underworld. Unlike the domesticated animals of later societies, the jaguar remained wild, elusive, and deadly, a perfect symbol of spiritual power. The were-jaguar, a recurring figure in Olmec art, with snarling fangs and almond-shaped eyes, is believed to represent a supernatural hybrid. Part feline, part human, possibly the result of a mythic union between a jaguar and a woman. Whether god, monster, or ancestor, it was a being that blurred the boundary between human and beast. Alongside the jaguar, the rain god was venerated as the bringer of life and destruction. In the unpredictable climate of the Gulf Coast, rain was both a blessing and a threat. When it came too late, crops withered. When it came too soon or too violently, it washed away entire villages. Appeasing the rain god meant survival. The maize god, too, held a central place in the Olmec spiritual imagination. Maize was not just a staple crop, it was life itself. Olmec people believed they were made from maize, shaped from divine dough, sustained by the sacred plant. Later, Mesoamerican myths would echo this belief, but the idea may have originated here, deep in the Olmec heartland. The maize god is often depicted as youthful, graceful, and crowned with ears of corn, an eternal symbol of growth, rebirth, and abundance. Perhaps most intriguing is the early appearance of a deity that scholars identify as a prototype of the feathered serpent, a god who would later become known as Quetzalcoatl to the Aztec and Kukulkan to the Maya. Among the Olmec, this serpentine figure may have symbolized the merging of opposites, earth and sky, death and rebirth, animal and divine. The serpent slithers through the earth while its feathers soar through the sky, a perfect embodiment of sacred duality, a concept central to Olmec belief. Duality permeated the Olmec worldview. Male and female, light and dark, water and fire. These were not opposites in conflict, but complementary forces in harmony. Transformation, whether spiritual or physical, was seen as a way to navigate this duality. The recurring theme of human-animal hybrids in Olmec art reflects a belief that humans could transcend their form, temporarily assuming animal characteristics to commune with the divine or protect the community. Their sacred geography mirrored this metaphysical balance. Caves represented entrances to the underworld, wombs of the earth where gods were born and ancestors returned. Mountains were pillars that connected the terrestrial to the celestial, and often served as the setting for origin myths. Even artificial mounds in cities like Venta were shaped to resemble sacred hills. Water, ever present in their environment, symbolized life, fertility, and the boundary between worlds. Rivers and swamps were liminal spaces, places of danger, magic, and transformation. To maintain cosmic order, the Olmec turned to rituals, some symbolic, others shockingly real. Archaeological excavations at sites like San Lorenzo and Venta have revealed evidence of bloodletting, a practice in which elites pierced their own bodies, tongues, ears, and genitals, to offer sacred blood to the gods. Blood, the vital essence, was seen as the fuel that sustained the universe. In some contexts, it was not enough to offer one's own. Human sacrifice may have occurred to consecrate temples, mark seasonal changes, or appeal for rain and fertility. Buried offerings, decapitated figurines, and the positioning of skeletons suggest that death, when given to the gods, became a source of renewal. Amidst this spiritual framework, one of the most iconic features of Mesoamerican culture begins to take shape: the ball game. The Olmec are believed to have invented or at least ritualized this activity, which would spread throughout the region and endure for centuries. Played with rubber balls on defined courts, the game was more than a sport. It was a cosmic drama, reenacting the struggle between light and darkness, life and death. In later Maya belief, the ball court was seen as a portal to the underworld, and the game itself a battle for the soul of the universe. While Olmec rules remain unknown, the ceremonial importance is clear. Ball players were often depicted with elaborate gear, and some may have been sacrificed at the end of the match. Martyrs to the gods. These spiritual practices weren't just the province of the elite. They were part of a shared cultural rhythm that united the Olmec people across cities, classes, and generations. Rituals were public spectacles as well as private acts. Offerings were buried beneath temples, but also tucked into household altars. Masks and figurines depicting gods or spirit animals were found in both palaces and modest homes. Religion infused everything, from crop cycles to political decisions, from birth to burial. It is difficult to separate myth from history, faith from fact, when studying the Olmec. Their writing remains elusive, their language unknown. What survives is art, symbols carved in jade, stone, and clay that whisper of their beliefs but do not speak plainly. We see the wide almond-shaped eyes of their gods. We feel the weight of their altars, the anguish in their sacrificial imagery. And though we cannot read their prayers, we sense the power of a people deeply attuned to the divine rhythms of nature. Long before European astronomers charted the stars with telescopes, The Olmec were watching the heavens with naked eyes and sacred intent. The rising and setting of celestial bodies shaped their calendar, their ceremonies, even the placement of their cities. At Venta, for instance, key structures are aligned not at random, but with astronomical precision, matching solstices, cardinal directions, and celestial cycles. The north-south axis of the city corresponds to solar movements, suggesting that Olmec architects were also sky watchers, grounding their urban plans in the rhythms of the cosmos. These alignments weren't merely aesthetic, they were spiritual and mathematical. The Olmec saw time as a living force, something to be honored, measured, and mastered. While their own full calendar system remains unclear, there is strong evidence they laid the groundwork for the complex timekeeping traditions later developed by the Maya and Zapotec. Some scholars argue that the Olmec used a 260-day ritual calendar, known as the Tzolk'in in later cultures, a sacred cycle that tracked fertility, agriculture, and divination. Their understanding of time was not linear, but cyclical. Seasons returned, stars revolved, kings died and were reborn. Time was alive, and the gods moved through it in predictable patterns the Olmec learned to follow. Supporting this celestial worldview was a numerical system, possibly one of the earliest in the Americas. While no full counting system has been found intact, dot and bar motifs in Olmec art and iconography suggest a base 20 vigesimal counting method, similar to what would later become the backbone of Maya mathematics. These notations may seem simple, but they represent a sophisticated understanding of quantities and time intervals, especially in combination with calendar glyphs. Of particular intrigue is the question of Olmec writing. For decades, scholars believed the Olmec were purely pre-literate, a civilization that relied solely on symbols, not true script. But in 2006, the discovery of a palm-sized slab of stone shook that assumption. Known as the Cascajal block, this artifact, found near San Lorenzo, contains 62 unique symbols arranged in rows, some repeated, others modified, carved into a flat serpentine surface. If authentic, it could represent the earliest known writing system in the Americas, dating back to around 900 BCE. The block has fueled fierce debate. Some experts argue it represents true script, a formal system of writing used for communication or ritual. Others see it as proto-writing, a symbolic system not yet evolved into a full language. Its meaning remains undeciphered, its context uncertain. But if the Cascajal block is indeed writing, then the Olmec weren't just carvers of stone. They were the first scribes of Mesoamerica. Even without confirmed writing, their legacy of knowledge is unmistakable. The Olmec passed down a way of thinking, an approach to the universe that valued order, measurement, and cosmic balance. This intellectual framework would be inherited and expanded by the Zapotec, Maya, and Aztec civilizations, all of whom built upon Olmec foundations in astronomy, calendar making, and cosmology. The Maya would later refine the long count calendar, tracking time over thousands of years with incredible precision. The Aztecs would adapt the Tonalpohualli, a ritual calendar rooted in divine cycles. But these developments didn't appear in a vacuum. They were born from a tradition that began with the Olmec's first gaze toward the stars, their first alignment of temple and sun, their first counting of sacred days. The most striking medium the Olmec worked with was jade, a precious, vibrant green stone valued not only for its beauty, but for its symbolic significance. Jade was believed to contain life force, associated with maize, water, fertility, and eternal vitality. Working jade required immense skill. It was incredibly hard and could only be shaped with hours of grinding using sand, water, and patience. And yet, the Olmec mastered it, producing celts, figurines, and masks that still captivate modern eyes with their elegance and craftsmanship. The celts, typically axe-shaped, were both tools and symbols. Many were never used for cutting. They were buried in ritual caches, often aligned geometrically or accompanied by offerings. These celts bore incised images of gods, animal-human hybrids, or sacred symbols, suggesting they functioned as talismans or ceremonial items. Their smooth symmetry and green sheen gave them a spiritual aura, embodying the sacred duality between utility and ritual. Even more compelling are the jade masks. Though rarely found with skulls or in burial contexts, these masks likely played a ceremonial role, worn by shamans or displayed during rituals. Their features are unmistakably Olmec: downturned mouths, almond eyes, and broad, flat noses. These were not portraits of individuals. They were representations of spiritual states or divine ancestors. In these expressions, one finds serenity, mystery, and the weight of ancient power. But it was in their ceramics that the Olmec displayed the full range of their imagination. Unlike the grand scale of their stone heads or altars, their pottery spoke of intimacy, ritual, and transformation. Among the most iconic creations are the baby face figurines, small ceramic sculptures with chubby cheeks, round heads, and serene or expressionless faces. These have puzzled archaeologists for decades. Do they represent infants? Deities? An idealized form of the Olmec elite? Some scholars suggest they embody supernatural beings, a blend of human and divine, possibly connected to fertility or rebirth. Alongside these are the transformation figures, statues that depict humans morphing into animals, especially jaguars. These hybrids, often crouching or twisting in motion, reflect the Olmec belief in shape-shifting and spiritual duality. They capture moments of mystical metamorphosis, a man's face stretching into a jaguar's snout, hands becoming claws, eyes narrowing into feline slits. These were not fantasy. They were expressions of the Olmec worldview, where boundaries between species, worlds, and identities were fluid. The symbolism embedded in these artistic forms is profound. Recurring motifs, such as cleft foreheads, flame eyebrows, crossed bands, and upturned lips, reappear across media and sites. These were not random designs, but likely held esoteric meanings, possibly denoting lineage, spiritual rank, or cosmological concepts. The were-jaguar motif, with its toothy snarl and stylized features, becomes a key symbol throughout Olmec art, representing divine lineage, supernatural power, or the fusion of human and animal realms. Indeed, the Olmec iconographic language was so cohesive and recognizable that modern archaeologists coined the term Olmec style to describe its unique aesthetic. Characterized by curvilinear forms, balanced compositions, and expressive abstraction, the Olmec style became a visual signature across a vast territory. Even distant regions beyond the Olmec heartland, such as Chiapas, Oaxaca, and central Mexico, show influence of this artistic code, either through trade, migration, or cultural prestige. This stylistic influence was not fleeting. As Mesoamerica's other great civilizations rose, the Maya, Zapotec, Teotihuacan, and eventually the Aztec, they inherited and adapted elements of the Olmec visual vocabulary. The Maya's intricate glyphs and ceremonial masks echo Olmec prototypes. Aztec sculptors, too, would carry forward the spiritual symbolism of serpents, jaguars, and cosmic dualities first rendered in Olmec stone. Even the Aztec reverence for jade, obsidian, and sacred greenstone can be traced back to Olmec tradition. To call the Olmec the mother culture of Mesoamerica is not merely to acknowledge their chronological primacy. It is to recognize the deep aesthetic DNA they passed on to every civilization that followed. Their style was not static. It was dynamic, adaptable, and inherently symbolic, a visual system of myth and meaning that transcended time. But perhaps most remarkable is the emotional resonance of Olmec art. These objects, carved, molded, polished by hand over 3,000 years ago, still stir something in us. A jaguar child figurine crouching mid-transformation, a jade mask staring out with unknowable calm, a clay baby face gazing into eternity. These are not just relics. They are artifacts of thought, of belief, of human creativity at its most profound. What happened to the people who carved giants out of stone? The jungles of Veracruz and Tabasco, once filled with the clang of tools, the chants of priests, and the bustle of ceremonial life, slowly fell silent. By around 400 BCE, the last great Olmec city, Venta, was abandoned. A civilization that had once shaped the very identity of Mesoamerica vanished into the mist of history. But why? There was no singular cataclysm, no recorded war, no massive earthquake or fire. Instead, the fall of the Olmec appears to have been a slow unraveling, the result of a web of interconnected challenges that overwhelmed even their sophisticated society. One of the most pressing theories centers on environmental degradation. The Olmec had flourished in the fertile alluvial plains of the Gulf Coast, where the Coatzacoalcos and Tonalá rivers delivered life-giving waters. But this abundance came with a price. Intensive agriculture, slash-and-burn clearing of forests, and the growth of large urban centers may have gradually eroded the soil and depleted natural resources. As demands on the environment increased, the land may have ceased to support the population, forcing communities to fragment or migrate. Compounding this environmental stress were climate fluctuations. Paleoclimate data indicates a possible shift in rainfall patterns during the period of Olmec decline. The region may have experienced prolonged droughts or changes in the seasonal monsoons that impacted crop cycles and water supply. Rivers, the lifeblood of Olmec civilization, may have changed course due to tectonic shifts, flooding, or sedimentation, isolating once prosperous trade and ritual centers from their sources of sustenance. The abandonment of La Venta, the spiritual and political successor to San Lorenzo, marks a symbolic endpoint. Excavations show that monuments were deliberately defaced or buried, and ceremonial structures were left unfinished. Some archaeologists interpret this as evidence of internal unrest, perhaps a revolt against elite rule or a breakdown in centralized authority. Others suggest invasion or competition from rising neighboring powers may have destabilized Olmec control over trade routes and tribute systems. Yet what followed was not total destruction. It was diffusion. The Olmec did not simply disappear. Their people, beliefs, and practices migrated and mingled with emerging cultures across Mesoamerica. The Maya, whose earliest ceremonial centers arose in the centuries following the Olmec decline, inherited a spiritual cosmos and iconographic system that bore clear Olmec influence. Their jaguar deities, stelae monuments, and ritual ball courts all find roots in Olmec precedent. In the highlands of Oaxaca, the Zapotec developed a writing system and urban design that mirrored many Olmec elements. Meanwhile, in central Mexico, the seeds of Teotihuacan, one of the greatest cities of the ancient world, were planted with ideas likely germinated in Olmec soil: cosmological dualism, architectural orientation to celestial bodies, and the notion of divine kingship. Olmec artistry, too, endured. The Olmec style, with its curvilinear forms and spiritual abstraction, was echoed in later sculpture and ceramics for centuries. Their aesthetic code became a shared visual language, transcending time and geography. Perhaps most enduring of all was the ideological legacy they left behind: the integration of sacred kingship, shamanic transformation, and cosmic order into the heart of civilization. For the Olmec, the world was never purely physical. It was a spiritual landscape, shaped by ritual, myth, and balance. This worldview became the foundation of Mesoamerican civilization itself. Today, archaeologists debate the specifics of the Olmec's decline. Was it a climate crisis? A political collapse? A cultural evolution? The evidence remains fragmentary, but what is clear is this: the fall of the Olmec was not the end, but the beginning of something greater. In their disappearance, they seeded the future. In their silence, they spoke to the centuries. The colossal heads they left behind, half buried in jungle soil, staring skyward, are not relics of failure. They are monuments of endurance, symbols of a people whose spirit was too powerful to be forgotten, whose ideas flowed outward like rivers, nourishing new empires long after their own cities fell. The kingdom of the Olmec, then, was not truly lost. It was transformed, echoing through stone, myth, and memory, carried forward by those who would come to define the ancient Americas.